So in this video, we'll talk a little bit about the canon and some of the terminology associated with the prophetic books. In general, the prophetic books are broken into two different categories. There's the anterior prophets, which we would now call the historical books: Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles. This would be kind of that middle phase, the transition point between the early prophets and the classic prophets. And then we have the posterior prophets, and these are further subdivided into major and minor. The major minor distinction, that's just the length. The major prophets, they wrote, their books are longer. The minor prophets, their books are shorter. So in the major prophets, we have Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Baruch, and Ezekiel. And then the minor, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. And then not pictured, because he's not considered a prophet, is Daniel. The book of Daniel is actually an example of apocalyptic literature, which is somewhat related to and similar to prophetic literature, but it's a little bit different. Whereas prophetic literature is all about the relationship of the people with God, apocalyptic literature is it's oriented towards the future inbreaking of the kingdom of God. So it's oriented towards the end times, and it's often expressed in very vivid symbolism communicated through dreams or visions. And it's about how it's about more about the progression of history towards its fulfillment in the kingdom of God and the coming of the kingdom of God. Apocalypse means revelation, so similar to the prophetic books, but not quite. And then the canon is basically just like which books are considered inspired text, inspired by God. It also refers to the order of the books and how they're categorized. And there's different orders of the books that are possible. For instance, in the canon of the Bible used by Catholics, Hosea is the first minor prophet. And these minor prophets were all grouped together. They're known as the Book of the 12. Hosea is the first one, even though Amos is chronologically first. So the order that they're in kind of reveals the purpose of the book and the relation to each other. So Hosea comes first because he reveals the sense and the purpose of the books and the main theme of the rest of the prophets, that of the Israelites' betrayal of the covenant and their need for conversion. In addition, the Book of Lamentations and Daniel are not always considered prophetic books. We've already talked about Daniel, but Lamentations is sometimes grouped with the wisdom literature, and Baruch is not considered canon by many Protestant denominations, and this is because we don't have a Hebrew translation available for this. We only have it available in ancient Greek, and so many of the fathers of the church used it. Some didn't, but when us Catholics established the canon of the Old Testament, we decided to include Baruch, because it would have been available in Greek by the time of Jesus. It was used by a number of the church fathers, so we've included it. Also, the position of these different sections of the Bible in relation to each other reveal something. So in the original Hebrew Bibles, it went the Torah, the Pentateuch, so the first 5 books of the Bible, they're always first, and then the historical books, the interior prophets, and then the rest of the prophets, and then the wisdom literature. But in the Greek Bibles and in later Bibles, it goes the Pentateuch, historical books, wisdom literature, and then it ends with the prophets. And the reason this difference is important is in the original Greek, the prophets interpret the law, which is given in the Pentateuch, whereas if you place the prophets at the end and you have the New Testament that comes right after it, then the prophets prepare the way for Jesus. And it's not like one is the correct way to understand this. The prophets do both of those things, but if we know about the two different orderings, then we understand that a little bit better about their purpose. And of course, as Christians, we understand the prophets better as preparing the way for Jesus, and so we put them at the end of the Old Testament.